Azimuth continues to work on the Omnitrix, messing with the system as the entire place starts to rumble and fall apart. After grabbing what he could and throwing them into his biosuit, they all left and run out off towards the exit, seeing that the hybrid were there with several very large robotic drones similar to that of what Vilgax used to use, along with what was left of their DNA alien crew, with 6-6 on a leash without his helmet on since it had broken. The hybrid says that they will not allow them to get in the way of their plans before letting 6-6 off the leash as they flew forward at them ready for a fight. Azimuth tells the others that he'd need some time to complete the new system for the Omnitrix. Ben says they'll do what they can and starts to get up, but Azimuth tells him that he needs to stay put until it's completed. Gwen then has her eyes glowing with magic as she then creates blue spheres of sparkling magical energy and tells Ben, "Don't worry babe, we got this," as she then begins to throw the spheres at the DNA aliens, and Kevin absorbs the ground to start attacking with my axe using a blaster. Ben says, "Be careful, beautiful," as he watches Gwen specifically while letting Azimuth do what he needed for the Omnitrix. Azimuth begins talking with Ben about what all had happened during the time with the Omnitrix, and so he begins to tell him everything, though a shortened version, just cutting to the point, and asking why he was so interested in him specifically, though the creator of the watch then looks up at Ben for a moment and goes back to working on the upgrades. 6-6 starts shooting at Ben as Gwen threw up a magical barrier and Kevin slammed into the bounty hunter turned criminal, telling them that they got this for now, just keep working. The creator nods and continues to do this as he begins to say something, but pauses seeing Ben watching Gwen, keeping more of an eye on her, and asked if she's someone special to him. Ben looks at Azimuth and says that she is, and the creator asks more about what went on between them. Not to pry, but he was simply curious as it had been a long time since he'd had someone to talk to, and it was nice to finally have someone to do so with. Sighing softly, Ben then tells the Galvan that he'd been in love with her since they were 10 years old, but had only recently started flirting with one another, going on to say, "It's kinda funny. We couldn't stand one another, even though our dads were best friends and wanted us to get along." Azimuth then asked him what exactly changed that, and Ben then tells him that they went on a road trip together when he'd gotten the Omnitrix, and since then they've been growing slowly closer to one another, going on to say that he should thank Azimuth for creating the watch, as the two of them probably would have never gotten along with one another. Hearing this, the creator starts to laugh, telling Ben that, "I created the Omnitrix to bring others together in understanding, but never in my wildest fantasies did I ever think it would bring someone together in love." As the battle continues on around them, Ben goes to say something but stands up quickly, extending the plumber staff he had, and then swung it, taking out a DNA alien that had somehow gotten behind Azimuth and was trying to attack them, as he then sits back down apologizing. The creator of the Omnitrix then compliments Ben on his reflexes as he starts to get back to work and asks Ben if they'd kissed her yet, with the wielder of the Omnitrix then blushing slightly and stuttering out that he hadn't, because he felt like that should truly be something special. The Galvan then smiled hearing that and told Ben not to screw this up because once she's gone for good, and Ben nods hearing that, but questions how he knew so much about love exactly. Azimuth tells Ben that he was in love once a long time ago, and he'd lost his chance, and didn't want to see him making the same mistakes, with Ben accepting that answer before asking how Azimuth knew about kissing, to which he says that the Galvan have similar courtships to that of human beings. Ben sees Gwen trying to hold off the hybrid just as Azimuth finished installation of the upgrades, and the Omnitrix then began to glow as the dial turned blue and began to spin on its own, with the entire thing glowing green with black outlines, sort of like the reverse of Upgrade's pattern, and it had shrank down to the size of a normal watch. Ben begins to get up, but Azimuth tells him to hold it because he'd set a new roster for handling the hybrid and the DNA aliens, and that none of his old transformations would be available to him anymore while messing with the dial, and telling Ben that he was granting him one extra transformation for emergency situations only, as they can be quite stubborn. We see Gwen's shield starting to crack as the hybrid was trying to break their way through it to get to Gwen, and Ben calls out her name while Azimuth says, "Hold it, hero," before making the new set appear and turning the dial as the holograms began to change shape and stopping at one in particular. "Try this one on." Ben nods and stands up, calling out, "It's hero time," as he then slaps down the dial the same way he'd done as a kid, and we see a green flash on off to the side as Gwen's shield had broken, and the hybrid commander was about to attack her as a large hand then came into view as it had blocked the path between the two of them, with Gwen looking up and seeing Ben was big. Way big. Way Big grabbed the hybrid as his hand was almost bigger than they were, smirking at them as they began to squeeze. The hybrid commanding that they put them down, as no vermin should ever be allowed to grab them in such a manner, clawing his hand, making Way Big growl, calling out, "That's it, you're out of here." Ben throws the hybrid out into space before looking down at the drones and the aliens as the drones began to shoot at him. Though Way Big then crosses his arms to block the blasts that were aimed at his face, causing him to charge up a blast on accident and firing at the drones, vaporizing them in the process. Smirking, Ben then looks to the aliens, who all began to retreat as 6-6 tries to attack him, and Ben slams his hands together as if crushing a bug that was flying around him, then letting the former bounty hunter drop onto the ground as they writhed in pain. After the battle was over, Way Big changed back into Ben, and he'd started cycling through the set list, curious about the new ones, as Gwen ran over and threw her arms around his neck, hugging him, with Ben hugging her back by the waist, and the two of them were glad to see that both of them were okay, as Gwen rested her head on his chest, glad to see he's alive and that he'd gotten the watch fixed. Kevin tells Ben, "Nice going, Tennyson," as he walks over with the others, and the two let go of one another from their hug, and both turn to them holding the hand of one another. Ben asked Azimuth what he was going to be doing now exactly, as they tell him that they're going to be heading back to their home planet and help prepare for the effort against the hybrid, as he'd been in isolation for too long. Mayak says that they can just drop her off at the Oratarium bar, as she could get a ride there because she's got an old friend that owes her a favor. And the group nods, with Azimuth improvising a ride from the only drone that hadn't been completely vaporized by Ben, and waved goodbye before going inside, and calling out to Ben to take good care of her, making Ben blush a bit again. The next scene is Julie sleeping under a tree as she then hears the sound of engines and looks around trying to grab her phone as the ship she'd seen Ben getting into was about to land, and we see Kevin checking out some stuff on monitors while landing, with Julie's phone cutting out due to a special frequency that cuts out all the tech of any planet that hasn't reached the tech level of the ship. Ben thanks Kevin as they start to leave the ship, with Gwen saying goodbye as he'd done so, though Kevin says, "Not so fast," before showing them his new orders were to investigate the hybrid and work alongside Ben Tennyson to help stop whatever they may be planning. He then says, "Looks like you guys are stuck with me for a while longer." Smiling, Ben holds up his fist to Kevin, who then bumps it with a nod and says they can take his ride back to their houses and that he'd drop them off, though Gwen says that her parents would freak out if they saw her coming home riding in a spaceship. Kevin tells them he wasn't talking about the ship as he walked over to the cargo hold and opened up a large door, walking inside, confusing Ben and Gwen as they see lights coming on, and Kevin then drives out and stops beside them in a dark green colored custom designed muscle car with 2 black stripes going down it from bumper to bumper. Ben says, "Nice ride," as Kevin thanked him, telling him that his dad made it a long time ago and he'd been keeping it well maintained, and that it became his when he got his license, as Julie looks up, hearing the motor of the car previously fighting with her phone but not getting it to work, and see the spaceship vanish as she sees Ben with the other two driving off in a car, and growls in annoyance that she had missed her chance.